All right. It looks like we are live. Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to another installment of Vantage Ventures Real Talks. My name is Isaac Obiyama. Thank you so much for joining us today. This is another one of our Real Talks that's a part of Vantage Ventures DiVersify. And for those that don't know, this is an initiative focused on both recruiting and retaining diverse entrepreneurship and entrepreneurs of color here in Appalachia. And a big part of that is hearing the stories of entrepreneurs of color in our community and learning from them as well. So we're coming off another great Real Talk with Adrienne Harris, and I'm very excited, very, very excited to introduce our first guest today, Crystal Good. Crystal Good she's hard to put into just one box, but she prefers the title artist, advocate, and entrepreneur. She's a member of the African American Appalachian Poets, a group of writers and artists whose creations and existence combat the erasure of African American identity in the Appalachian region. And she's an Irene McKinley Scholar, a W. Newstart Fellow, and the author of Valley Girl. So she's also the founder and CEO of Mixed Media, a government relations and consulting firm that leverages social media engagement and strategies for mission-driven organizations. And Black by God, the West Virginian, blackbygod.org, an emerging storytelling organization dedicated to providing Black people in West Virginia with relevant news. Crystal holds the completely made up but totally real office of social media senator for the digital district of West Virginia, whose platform encourages digital and political literacy. So I'm very happy to introduce to you all. I'll give like a virtual round of applause here. Crystal Good. Crystal, how's it going?
It's good. I mean, I'm Crystal Good. I'm my last name, but yeah, no, I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing very well, very well. And so you're bringing us some really bright yellow energy. I know you're out in LA, but the weather has kind of turned a little bit for the better here in West Virginia. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what you got on?
Yeah, so I just got this in the mail. Sometimes you order things and then they arrive and you're like, "Oh, I forgot about that." But this was a
Yeah.
delight. Honoring John. I think I got it the day after John Lewis's birthday, and so
Mhm.
yeah, good trouble. And also I noticed that it is my WVU colors, a little gold and blue, a little West Virginia. So yeah, and I just give a little plug here from another Affrilachian West Virginia entrepreneur. Making earrings. Gosh, and so anyway, I'm just happy to be here with you and talk about what we're going to talk about.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so I think for those that, may not be familiar with your brand and who you are, I know I just gave your resume, your bio, but maybe give us a little bit more of a background into kind of what you do and hearing it from you.
Well, some people, people have met me at different points, and some people will just be meeting me today from this platform. A lot of people know me as a poet and a performer. Some people know me from my policy work, advocacy work, and then some people are like, "What's she talking about? She's a social media senator, or um, but I'm excited today because what's happening. For me and my life and career and passions and creative pursuits is they're all coming together. And that is all coming together in my latest, which I hope is sort of my greatest initiative, and that is to create a Black by God, a storytelling organization that is to, for, and by, and centered in Blackness for West Virginia. And I say that, Isaac, because one of the things that the global pandemic, as we know, has really shown is the health disparities in African American communities. But
Yes.
what it's shown to me is the media disparities, and that's what I'm passionate about talking about, and sort of helping people to see that the shocking statistic and truth that according to the West Virginia Press Association, in 35 years there has been only three, and I'm one of them, Black reporters employed. And I believe it's, in all of the West Virginia newspapers that are a part of that. So we're in a crisis, an information crisis. And I think that that's what I'm excited about this conversation and
Yeah.
getting other people excited about.
No, absolutely. And I guess I think for people of color, this may be um, kind of I'll say a dumb question, but why is it important for there to be black owned media? I mean, you kind of touched on it briefly, but
Yeah, and I think it's just something that we kind of like, we skip over in a way. Like one of I have a piece coming out probably next week on in 100 Days of Appalachia, which you're probably familiar with. And when I'm talking about the media disparity, we know that Governor Justice in West Virginia is all across the headlines for the vaccine rollout, and that's a good thing, right? But what's missing inside that narrative is, are the Black communities being vaccinated at the same rate as white communities? And we know that they're not. And so there's been an outcry of, hey, what are we going to do about the vaccine disparities? How are we going to get vaccines into the Black communities in West Virginia proportionately, right? And so people are making noise about this, but what's missing is Black storytellers and Black journalists and people that are already a part of the community being able to build on that narrative. So what we're missing, right, is information. And today that's highlighted by the health information. So thankful that Henry Louis Gates, our scholar from Kaiser, West Virginia, whose PBS documentary is airing now on the Black church, really kind of highlighting how that has been the information system and the resource for Black communities. And there's a reason for that. And there's a reason that, all of that weight shouldn't be on the Black church and the pastors and such. So anyway, that's I'm trying to bring attention to that. It's a big conversation in the Black community and in the community at large.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what would you say is the primary reason why there's not as much investment in that at the moment?
It's just visibility. I mean, Appalachia is invisible often in the landscape of America, only when, these stereotypical images of, hillbillies, or as we say, sort of like, folks that the coastal elites want something to look down on. But inside of that is the Black community that has always been a part of this of the narrative of Appalachia, but hasn't been given the microphone. And inside that, we have Indigenous people that have truly been written off and forgotten. So, it's about visibility, Isaac. And so even programs like this are giving visibility intentionally, and that's what it takes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so this also isn't something that's really new for you. From the conversations we've had before, you definitely have a history in Black media, in news, these types of things. So maybe can you paint that picture a little bit for us and explain the origins of it all?
I think, sort of how that's been a part of my life as a poet and a storyteller. And that's why, giving as the word Affrilatia that Frank X. Walker coined is, to make visible the invisible. And so being a poet and a storyteller, and even just introducing myself as Affrilachian, people were like, oh, that's cute. What does that mean? African American Appalachian. Now we have wonderful programs and podcasts like Black in Appalachia, and there's scholars that, so anyway, it's not becoming such a surprise or shock, but just the fact that people would think, oh, there's no Black people in Appalachia is just kind of a ridiculous notion that highlights the invisibility. So my poems, I think, have served as my way of storytelling. And so I'm integrating that into the concept of Black by God, where I'm really focusing on citizen reporters. I'm calling them folk reporters, because my goal is to engage the communities to be able to tell their own stories in their ways. And of course, credibility there, fact checks and, all of those details. But I'm building an idea that is really centered on citizen journalists and the community and people that are sometimes maybe left out because they don't have the requirements. They didn't go to J school, didn't do this, didn't do that. But we know none of that is required to tell your own story. Absolutely.
And so, maybe you can give us a little bit more of an insight into maybe the biggest challenges that you encountered, either, in the beginning of this journey, trying to start Black by God Virginia and starting it up, or just in the beginning of your entrepreneurial journey in general. I remember you telling us a story about you trying to buy a newspaper.
Yeah,
which was
that's why we're here. I tried to buy the last Black newspaper in West Virginia. It's called the Beacon Digest when I was 16 years old. I've always had this entrepreneurship spirit. I'm not really sure where it came from. But, from selling tickets to my neighbors so that they could watch my dance recitals to picking dandelions and then ringing the doorbell and saying, "Hey, Mrs. Jones, I just picked your dandelions. Do you want to pay me now?" Um, but I think where when I tried to buy the newspaper is because I thought that I could do a better job and that I had stories that I wanted to tell and I wanted to help other people tell their stories. I mean, I'm an artist at heart. So, when I look for ways that help people understand and digest content. So a broker, a bridge between sometimes, complex subjects like the legislature and policy and how to bring them into, everyday conversation. But being an entrepreneur, what I wish I knew then that I know now is that you can't do everything alone. And I think that often in my journey, I've always been met with, "Oh, well, it's your idea. Do something about it. Write the business plan. Learn the and those learn the QuickBooks. Learn everything, right?" And those skills are necessary. But I think often you can get defeated in the process instead of looking for the resources to help you or the organization or something to help you. Often I have been very defeated in not being able to do everything. I'm feeling like a failure because I don't understand this one concept. Today, I know what I'm good at, and I know how to ask questions. And I also recognize that, I'm one person and I'm not going to be able to do everything. Sort of that old thing where if you see a problem, then yeah, you should fix it. But not everybody should run for office and not everybody should do things. It's a whole ecosystem that I'm starting to understand, and hopefully Vantage Ventures and the resources that are coming in West Virginia will empower people on how to think through their ideas and find the resources to execute on them. So,
yeah, not doing it alone. I think that's that's a theme that's going to resonate with a lot of people, and I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people here in Appalachia. Doing it as a part of a community, doing it as part of a group. Maybe you could paint a little bit more of a picture for us on. I think we have a lot of young people who are tuning in who really want to know more about maybe a little bit more of your work and / education background and how you got to this point.
Well, I started college and high school at West Virginia State University. I did a dual enrollment, and I only share that because even though I started my undergrad when I was in high school in a dual enrollment program, it took me about 15, 20 years to get through that first degree. I got married, I had children, I had a lot of interests, but my undergrad was important to me. And so I finished that at West Virginia State University, proud to have been there and a part of that school and that school's history. And my undergrad was in communications. And, I remember when I graduated, because I wasn't in my 20s when I graduated. And then I pursued an MFA, and now I'm actually in the New Start program at WVU, which is a master's program, and it's helping me to build Black by God. And I just have to say, it's the smartest degree I have. This is the third one I'm working on, and this is the smartest one because it's actually giving me really practical skills that help me in my entrepreneurship initiative, which is Black by God, and helping me understand community newspapers and the resources. I mean, I'm telling you, if anybody is listening and has an interest in journalism and owning their own media, please look at the New Start program, because I can't say how important it is, not just to the skills, but also to the network that I'm building in it. So, my pursuit to today has just been a lot of curiosity, Isaac. I've always been a life learner, or always interested. Now because of COVID, it's endless Zooms, endless webinars. I'm I think every day on my calendar, I have signed up for something, whether I attended or not.
Mm.
But to your point, my journey has been in the traditional education sense. With an undergrad, I have an MFA from West Virginia Wesleyan, and of course, I'm working on a master's degree from WVU through the New Start program.
Yeah.
I think that all in that, my life lessons have been in trying and failing, and trying and failing, and trying and failing.
Yes, absolutely. That will resonate with entrepreneurs, I'm sure. Um, and as well as that theme of just being a lifelong learner, it seems like when we talk to entrepreneurs from all areas, that seems to be a really common theme, is that these people are curious, and they're just constantly searching for more information and trying to learn more. I think I'd like to pivot a little bit, if that's right with you. I'm thinking about this mission now of trying to bring more diversity, more diverse entrepreneurship specifically to Appalachia. I'd really value your insight on it. What do you think are the keys to bringing more diverse entrepreneurship here to Appalachia?
Well, I think we have to be honest, Isaac, and just take a look at the West Virginia legislature. Look at the bills that they're passing. Look at what West Virginia is putting out in the world in terms of being welcoming to diversity, welcoming to the transgender community, welcoming to. I mean, we are not putting our best face forward, and we know that there's a group of people that have, in my opinion, very backwards, very racist, very homophobic ideas, and they are putting those into a national narrative, which makes kind of the rest of us look pretty bad. The ones that are out here trying to do things that are welcoming, that do appreciate diversity and diversity in all, not just skin color, but age and education levels, everything. And so I think that that's where we have to start. I really think that nobody's going to want to come here if they feel that they won't be treated fairly, if we don't have workplace and employment protections, if we haven't sort of strengthened our schools and our curriculum to be inclusive. So I think a lot of what our challenge is really based in sort of the policies that specifically West Virginia, and West Virginia is not the only state in Appalachia, and that narrative that we're putting out into the world. And so it's almost like it's not a PR scrub that I'm saying. It's a genuine internal change. And I do believe that entrepreneurship and voices, across the state that are pushing for initiatives, that they will be able to apply the pressure on the business community, on elected officials and folks to say, hey, look, people don't want to come to West Virginia because, they don't feel safe, or they don't, as a matter of fact, they don't have the things that are required for their community, whether that's a grocery store or hair salon or some of the basic amenities, ancillary communities, or ancillary things that people need. So anyway, that to me, it's really an internal job. It's going to take work. And the first thing is sort of recognizing that although a lot of people, and I'm 6 generations West Virginia, born and raised Kanawha County, I love my home, but I also recognize that it's a hard sell. It's a hard sell.
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely. And so, what kind of advice would you give then? Because I love all of that, to entrepreneurs of color who are just starting their journey and, possibly starting their journey in more traditionally white places like West Virginia.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, Isaac. You have to find a network outside. You have to connect with national organizations, whether that's, for me, it's the, National Black Journalists Organizations. You have to connect with national organizations that are already organized, where you don't have to fight to say diversity. You don't have to fight to explain racism, white supremacy. You don't have to fight in those things. Those are narratives, and they, I'm finding, will help guide a lot of the work that you're doing, because it can be very frustrating. I don't think people understand. I've got 20 plus years of advocacy and working in mostly white environments, and I think maybe just now, maybe in 2020, in the aftermath of the outcry from the murders of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, that people are starting to recognize even the most well-meaning of progressive folks have some work to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a long journey, but it does seem like we're seeing a lot of really great change coming out of the year 2020, aside from, all the other terrible things that came along with that year. And so I'm just checking to see some of our questions that are coming in.
Sure.
So this one's a pretty good question. How does Crystal recommend, someone first starting off telling their story? How do they really do that?
Do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, I think that's the first step. It's the hesitation. So listen, I'm gonna tell you for the person asking that question. When I first started doing poetry, I organized the poetry event because I thought if I organized the poetry event, right, I was the hostess, then I could read my poems and people wouldn't judge me because I was the hostess. And sort of, in true Appalachian sense, if I'm throwing the party or the cookout or the potluck, everybody's going to clap for me. So I organized the poetry event. I read my poems and I called them Nada poems. I stood on stage and I said, these are Nada poems because I was too afraid to claim that I was a poet. And too afraid that the people there wouldn't like my poems, but I knew they'd clap for me because I had organized the event. So that was sort of my sneak way of doing it. And now, fast forward, I read my poems all over the world. I am a poet, but it just takes the courage to step up there and be vulnerable and share it. And hey, listen, one thing I've learned too is, sometimes we have a fear of sharing our story, and nobody might tell you this, but if you're afraid of sharing your story, sometimes that can be a little bit arrogant in the sense of like, really? I'm not. Oh, I hope that's not me. Is that
That's all right.
Is don't. How do I say this? The fact that you're afraid someone's or whatever your fear is, just do it because your story is important. And if it's only important to you in that moment of saying, all right, I did it, then that's all that matters. But I guarantee you, when you share your story with other people, you're not alone and other people have the same experiences.
I love that. So here's another question for you. So we talk a lot about the power of networking. And so what advice do you give for people of color who are trying to take advantage of networking in more traditionally white spaces?
Yeah, I mean, well, kind of my 2021 rule is I'm sort of resigning from being the only person of color in the room. So I kind of follow the Boy Scout rule, or at least I try to. And a two, a 2 or 3, because I think that often there's an extreme amount of pressure when you are the quote unquote only one in the room. Sometimes things will happen in that space that you will want to say, hey, that's not right. But if you do, then you're required to sort of offer the explanation and become the teacher. So I think my recommendation would be, you network where you are, you bloom where you're planted, but also you don't have to do it alone. So try to find peers and folks that you can, even if it's just you and another person there, you feel comfortable with going through those spaces, but also, like I said, lean on other networks. It's important to be a part of your local community, but there's also national organizations and especially so many resources through WVU that can connect you to broader communities. And so, that's sort of my suggestion that, keep it local, but also stay connected on a national scale.
Well, that staying connected, that segues us into this next question. Outside of your work, is there any great work by other Black poets or Black entrepreneurs you'd like to share?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, just Google Afro-Latin poets, every single one of them. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Dr. Cynthia Greenlee. I mean, there's a long list, but I'm very partial to the Afro-Latin poets, and that's whose work I buy. That's whose work I study. That's whose work I reference. That's whose work I teach. And as far as entrepreneurs go, I am in love with what's happening in Black media. The conversation from Media 2070, that's a really important conversation that's happening about media reparations and will really kind of frame the history of white supremacy, racism in in media from most people don't know that our biggest news organizations were founded and existed because they were selling slave ads, to how that moves into today. So, I could keep going with
Oh,
the media journalist pop up from Push Black to,
mhm.
all the things that you might be familiar with, Roots, and so many new things that are happening. So it's a moment for Black journalists and Black media in 2021, and I'm excited to keep supporting that and following that. So I would ask folks that if they're listening, let's do an exercise.
Yeah.
Try for 1 week a day to only consume media that is to, for, and by Black people, that is owned by Black people, written by Black people. Just try it and see. And that's one way to show your support. Give likes, give subscriptions, all that. But that would be my suggestion.
I love it. Yeah, absolutely. Let me read this. Yeah, this one's definitely a long one, but going back to what you said about the negative image of West Virginia in national media, how can West Virginian students entering journalism or public advocacy begin to combat this stereotypical narrative while still acknowledging the work that has to be done there?
Well, I think the more stories that we get out, that will be a natural way. I don't think we have to always address something as like, we're doing this to overcome the stereotype, right?
Yeah.
But it's almost just sort of a visibility. One of the things I'm excited about with Black by God is to be in celebration, right? I want to celebrate Black weddings. I want to celebrate, when successes happen. I don't care. Your kindergartner graduated from,
First grade. Yeah.
Facebook has a place for that, but I think we're also missing in community papers just sort of everyday celebrations. Back in the day, in the very early 18 and very early 1900s, West Virginia's Black newspapers would celebrate who came to town, right? So if Isaac came to visit me
Yeah.
in Kanawha County, it would be printed in there. Isaac came to visit, right? And I just think there's something charming and very wholesome about telling stories that are just about life, right? Also, of course, we need those very macro views of how, just like we're talking about, like how did these health disparities come in the Black community? How did, economic disparities? All of those things are very important things that you need a FOIA for. But also just telling the stories of everyday life and living.
Yeah, absolutely. This next question is a really good one. And I think one that I'm really interested to hear your answer on, which is from all your wonderful accomplishments now, what words of encouragement would you pass along to your 10-year-old self growing up in Appalachia?
Oh, I think about this all the time. And actually, I wish I have a little crystal that I kind of carry around so that I can remember. I would wear more crop tops, and not my 10-year-old self, but maybe my 16-year-old self. I think I just would have, not tried to squash my curiosity, right? And so I think, you reach a certain age where you kind of think, oh, I have to, what should I be doing? Or, you kind of try to fit into a narrative of something else. And then it just never kind of feels right. It feels like maybe you're wearing somebody else's clothes or something like that. So, I think I would go back and tell my 10-year-old self to just keep being creative, to just keep writing and dreaming and exploring. And, I was very thankful. I told this story once to the West Virginia teachers about my elementary school principal. And when I was in elementary school, I saw the kids that were in the gifted program get up and leave. And they went to this other classroom and they were learning stuff in there. I thought, what are they learning? And I would ask them and they would tell me that they got to do stories and plays. And I thought, well, I want to do that. And they would tell me I wasn't gifted. I couldn't do that. And I thought, well, don't know what that means. So I just decided to go, Isaac. And every time that the gifted kids got up, I got up and I went. And then the teacher would send me back. And then one day My principal, Mrs. Morrison, she saw this and she said, let her stay. She's allowed to be curious. And I think that those are the words that I've carried with me in my many sort of ventures, whether it's like starting an idea or, asking a question. I have permission to be curious. And so I give that to anybody listening if they need it in this moment, to just be curious.
Wow. Be curious. I think that is the perfect note right there for us to wrap up on. I want to say like a really quick thank you to you, Crystal. Thank you so much. I know you're very busy on the interview circuit, bouncing around all of that stuff.
Just today. So listen, if you guys are like in 4 different interviews, it's because today just is the day. I need to check my horoscope. But no, Isaac, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Of course. No, I think you provide some extremely valuable perspective, and it raised definitely a lot of issues and kept it real on this Real Talk. Absolutely. So thank you. And to those tuning in, thank you for taking this time to learn alongside us. For more information on our Real Talks, you can check out our Facebook page. And if you'd like to learn a little bit more about Vantage Ventures Diversify, you can check out our LinkedIn. So Crystal, where can people find you?
Please go follow. I'm at C Good Woman. I'm not responsible for your opinions on my tweets, but I will say that please follow blackbygod.org. Sign up for my newsletter there. Follow us on Twitter. We also have an Instagram account. You will get lots of wonderful historical information about West Virginia, but please follow and sign up for blackbygod.org. Yeah, that's it.
There you go. All right. Well, thanks again, and we will see you soon.
Okay. Bye, y'all.